the light at the end of the tunnel. For a moment, that's exactly what it felt like. After weeks, months of holding our breath, the universe finally seemed to grant us a moment of peace. My father had surgery, a procedure so complex the doctors warned us to prepare for the worst, was a success. He made it. The surgeon came out at his face, tired but with a small, reassuring smile, and told us he was stable. He wasn't out of the woods, not by a long shot. The road to recovery would be long and arduous, requiring round-the-clock care and immense patience. But he was alive. That was the miracle we had been praying for, the one thread of hope we clung to. My mother, who had been a pillar of strength, finally allowed herself to weep, not tears of grief, but of overwhelming relief. I held her, feeling the tremors of exhaustion and gratitude run through her body. In that same week, another small miracle unfolded. Xiaoling's father, who had been languishing, barely responsive to the aggressive treatments, began to show signs of improvement. It started subtly, a twitch of his fingers when Xiaoling spoke to him, his eyes tracking her movement across the room, a faint pressure when she squeezed his hand. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. They said his body was finally starting to respond to the medication. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, we weren't just fighting a losing battle. There was a glimmer of hope, a small, fragile flame in the darkness. We saw a future where both our fathers could sit with us again, maybe even share a meal, watch their grandchild grow. For a brief, beautiful period, it felt like our families could finally breathe. The suffocating weight of impending loss lifted just enough for us to catch our breath. Xiaoling and I would sit by our father's bedsides, sharing stories, planning for a future that suddenly seemed possible again. We talked about baby names, about renovating a room for my dad when he came home. My brother, Jiejun, even managed a genuine smile. The first I'd seen in months. It was a fragile peace, a temporary truce in our war against fate, but we cherished every second of it. We allowed ourselves to believe that the worst was behind us, that we had weathered the storm and were sailing into calmer waters. We were so focused on the medical battles that we almost forgot about the other enemy lurking in the shadows, the one we had created ourselves. But reality has a cruel way of snapping you back. The peace was shattered by a single phone call. It was for Jiejun. I saw his face drain of all color. His hand trembled as he held the phone to his ear. The loan sharks, the debt we had incurred, the desperate measures we took to pay for the initial hospital bills, was a monster that had only been sleeping. It was now awake and hungry. They were done waiting. The threats, which had been vague warnings before, now became terrifyingly specific. They knew where Jiejun worked. They knew my mother's daily routine. They knew where I lived with Xiaoling. The joy and relief of the past few days evaporated, replaced by a cold, stomach-churning fear. The hospital bills were still piling up. My father's recovery would cost a fortune, and now the mountain of debt was no longer just a number on a piece of paper. It was a physical threat to our existence. Jiejun was a wreck. He was consumed by guilt, convinced he had brought this horror upon our family. He started talking about desperate things, about running, about finding a way to pay them off. No matter the cost, he was spiraling, and I knew I couldn't let him face this alone. The fear was paralyzing, but seeing my brother so broken, I felt a different emotion rise within me: anger. Cold, hard anger. These predators were feasting on our desperation, kicking us when we were already down. They were thriving on our pain. I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let them destroy what was left of our family. That night, after a long, tense conversation with Xiaoling, I made a decision. Running wouldn't solve anything. They would always find us. Paying them would only empower them and bleed us dry. There was only one way to fight this. The next morning, I walked into a police station. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding against my ribs, but my resolve was firm. I sat down with the detective and told him everything. Every detail of the loan, the exorbitant interest, de-escalating threats. I explained how they preyed on people in desperate medical situations. The detective listened patiently, his expression grim. He told me they were well aware of this particular group, but getting victims to testify was nearly impossible. People were too afraid. They needed someone on the inside, someone willing to cooperate, to wear a wire, to be the bait that could finally help them build a case strong enough to dismantle the entire operation. He looked at me, the question hanging in the air. Are you willing to help us? He asked. It will be dangerous, very dangerous. I thought of my father, fighting for his life. I thought of Xiaoling and our unborn child. What kind of future could they have if we were always looking over our shoulders, living in fear? I took a deep breath. Yes, I said, I'll do it. I'll testify. I'll do whatever it takes. My decision sent a shockwave through the family. Jiejun begged me not to do it, terrified that I was signing my own death warrant. My mother pleaded with me, her eyes filled with a fresh wave of fear. She had just gotten her husband back from the brink. She couldn't bear the thought of losing her son. Even Xiaoling, who had supported my initial decision to go to the police, was now having second thoughts. The reality of the danger was sinking in, but I knew, deep down, that this was our only chance at a real future, a future free from this terror. I had to believe in the system, then. The police. I had to believe that doing the right thing was worth the risk. I agreed to help the police set up a sting operation. It was the most terrifying thing I have ever agreed to do. The loan sharks didn't wait for the police to make their move. It was as if they sensed our defiance. The retaliation was swift and brutal. It was no longer about a few threatening phone calls. One evening, as my mother was leaving the hospital, two men on a motorcycle cornered her, snatching her purse and whispering a chilling message in her ear, tell your son to back off. They vandalized Jiejun's car, spray painting warnings on the windows. They were closing in and tightening the noose, making it clear that they could get to any of us, at any time. But their most cruel, most terrifying threat was aimed directly at the heart of our new hope. They started targeting Xiaoling. They sent her a picture of our apartment building, taken from the street below. The message was simple: we know where you live. We know you're pregnant. That single threat changed everything. The danger was no longer just about me. It was about her. It was about our baby. The miracle of our father's survival was now overshadowed by a threat so dark and personal, it threatened to consume us all. The fight for our lives had just entered a terrifying new chapter.